This is Hat and Tat, a business podcast from two 80s kids.
Always more entertaining than your last Zoom call.
Or your next Zoom call.
Or your next, maybe, by a little bit. A little bit. Hypothetically speaking, if you were trying to record a podcast with Riverside with two mics in the same room and it didn't work for like 60 minutes, what would the best solution be?
Restart your computer.
No, mute, unmute. The right answer was mute, unmute.
Ding, 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 ding.
Riverside, we love you. If you'd like to sponsor us, let us know. Okay, Ed Catmull. So better known for his endeavors with Pixar, but let's just do a little corporate background so we cover that side. He kind of piqued our interest because he was on a podcast with David Sendra, and then we kind of went down this rabbit hole looking at old interviews, book reviews. He talked to the Stanford graduate class. He did an interview with Fortune way back when, and it's really interesting. But basically it starts in like 79 where it's at the graphics group, which is a computer division of Lucasfilm. And George Lucas actually hires Ed Catmull, who's a PhD in computer science, to kind of get cutting edge technology. And then George Lucas gets divorced and it's expensive. So he decides to sell this division for $10 million. And lo and behold, it's actually Steve Jobs who buys it. And then Steve Jobs buys it for $10 million and proceeds over the next decade to throw $50 million of his own capital to keep it alive. And then in 1995, the same year, actually the same week that they go public, they launch Toy Story, the first computer animated film, and the rest is history. Steve, what'd you think about Ed, our buddy Ed?
I would back up from when you said from when it all started to a story he told earlier on, as even much earlier. I think he was like 8, 9, 10 years old. He was a child growing up in the 50s. And he mentioned that his two heroes were Walt Disney and Albert Einstein.
Oh, that's cool.
Two very opposing people, but those were his things. He loved animation, he loved drawing, he loved art, but he also really liked physics and science. So even from like a stereotypical standpoint, two very different parts of the brain, two very different interests, but he pursued them both equally. He had this goal in life that later became his North Star, where he wanted to become the first person to create a full-length feature film made with computer graphics. So what's interesting is even at a young age, that became his goal, it became his mission in life. And at one point in grad school, he was working on some technology, and it was introduced to the animation department at Disney. And so he met with them, introduced some technology, and they offered him a job to go work on Space Mountain and use some of the technology he was creating on that ride. And he turned it down. And this was an ambition of his, like, love Disney, but what they offered him didn't align with his ultimate goal. So it was like a fast no.
That's
and moved
crazy.
on. And then he went to New York Tech to do his grad school stuff. And I think there was one other time, and I think it was when he was working with Lucasfilms, and he was part of that computer graphics group. And at one point, he like met with George Lucas and was like, "I want to create a feature length film." And who David Sender interviewed him on the podcast was like, "What did he say?" And he's like, "Well, he didn't say anything." But then the next day, the president came to me and said, "George doesn't want to do that." So I think at some point, like, it was kind of writing on the wall for computer graphics group inside Lucasfilms, and he knew that wasn't going to be his mission. He was kind of like had to figure out what else to do, and then just serendipitous, Steve Jobs comes in, buys the company, and they create Pixar, and that becomes the North Star of Pixar.
That's pretty crazy. I had no idea, even though I listened to the same podcast, that it was from that young of an age. And pretty wild that, I mean, one of his heroes, he gets offered a job, but it's not the type of work that he wants. And he has the resolve to just be like, no, not what I'm doing, and stick to the North Star. That's pretty cool.
It's powerful. I think there's lots of people where, especially like coming out of school, like you need a job, you wanna work, getting your first job is probably one of the more difficult things to do, and if Disney comes along and says like, "Hey, here's a job, come work for us," I think most people would have used that as a toe in the door to get a job with Disney
Yeah.
and, like, kind of parlay that into what your mission is and your goal and what you wanna do, but because it wasn't directly tied to it, it was a fast no for him, which is pretty incredible.
Yeah, that's wild. I kind of want to get into his like tips on how to work and how to manage creative people because I find it's really interesting and he's really well known for this.
Are you talking about
Um,
the brain trust?
yes, I want to talk about the brain trust. In a lot of the like modern interviews, the brain trust is just kind of regarded as this group of people that provided info and feedback, and it was really useful. But I found an interview from like 12 years ago when he got into kind of like the four keys of the brain trust. Now, apparently, these were typically held after a film viewing or a 2-day offsite. If it was a really difficult problem, they would have 6 to 7 people in the room. If it was going well, they'd have more people. They'd have like 25 to 30 people in the room, and that was more to show the process, include more people. But if it was a serious problem, it was like 6 or 7 people. That's it. So the first rule was that nobody overrides the director. His whole goal is to like remove the power structure from the room. And the goal is for the director not to be defensive because they're highly exposed and they just want to help. They don't want to criticize, they just want to help. The second key was it's peer to peer, filmmaker to filmmaker. There's no boss to like subordinate. This is peer to peer. The third is everyone shares in the success. Like this is one company, we're moving together, we're all rowing in the same direction. And then the last one was give and take honest notes. And he actually preferred the word candid versus honest. And he said your thoughts and notes should inspire the recipient. It should say what's wrong or what isn't clear or what doesn't make any sense. It should come at a timely moment and it doesn't make demands and it doesn't even have to include a fix, but it should be specific. And I was like, okay, that's actually like useful feedback for how to like try to get the right people together in a room. He also mentioned that having people outside the firm are really useful so they could get an outside view and then it would be like sporadic. So Steve Jobs, when he did this, would only come in every whatever quarter. So he hadn't seen the film for a while. So that would be interesting feedback. And his whole goal was like when ego left the room, it was just magic. And he equated it to like athletic flow or writing flow where everyone was just jiving together. And there was an interesting example that wasn't with Pixar, it was actually with Disney later on and they were doing Frozen and it wasn't working. And they had this whole story about like a bad queen and she had this like bad army of snowmen and people were like, yeah, this isn't working. And they did an offsite, did a brain trust and basically came up with a story that Frozen became and it clicked and it worked. So it just showed like the power to like switch direction to somewhere productive.
I swear I've listened to another podcast where they talked about Frozen and how broken it was and having to kind of strip things down and have honest conversations and tough conversations to get it back on track and like become the movie it became. And it was like it was a long process. And I had no idea at the time it was like actually tied back to Ed and his brain trust process. Some interesting things I think is like they didn't try and shoehorn that process onto every single meeting, every single process, every single function. Like it was just like bringing in like at critical times when you need that feedback, which I thought is really interesting. And second, I think the peer-to-peer aspect, I think makes a ton of sense. And also people that for the outside perspective, when you're working on something, heads down so deep, you can get blinders and it's kind of hard to see, pull back and see that. So getting peers that have been in the same position, but can provide an outside point of view is probably part of what makes that such a good process. If they're not peers, there's always like a little bit of a dance between like who's giving feedback and what do they mean behind this and behind that instead of just having it be like a trusting place.
And I think there's a couple interesting points on that, like from the peer perspective that they used from a design standpoint to make sure people felt like peers. One I found interesting was tech people and artists were paid the same. So they
Mm.
were very much on the same scale. And then Steve Jobs, when they built the building, he made an unpopular decision where he made all the washrooms near like the middle of the building, and there was only one washroom for men and women, like separate, but like in one location.
Mhm.
And everyone was like, this is ridiculous because we have to walk all the way across the building to go to the washroom. But because of that, you had artists and tech people and everyone else mingling. And apparently that led to a lot of like side conversations and actually solved a lot of problems, which I thought was really cool.
Yeah, that's super fast just from organizational design to be thinking about those aspects all the time. One other story Ed tells, was about not letting leaders and Steve Jobs speak for the first 10 to 15
Yeah,
minutes of the brain trust meetings. I got the feeling he was just kind of giving that advice in general. Like, if you are the most powerful person, if you're the leader in the room, don't speak first.
yep,
Otherwise, that sets the tone for the rest of the meeting and people might shrink back a little bit. And even though leaders will say, you can say whatever you want, like, be honest with me, deep down, a lot of them probably don't want that. They don't want to be confronted in front of a lot of people, or they don't want no people. Um, but yeah, that's important. Give people a chance to express their opinions, share their feelings and emotions and ideas before the leader or the person with power or perceived power sets the tone and the direction for the rest of the meeting.
yeah. I think that was a really good insight from him. And I mean, he's super humble. He's super calm. So you think he'd come off as a very like passive, relaxed person, but he had the um, awareness that he's like, no, because of my position of power, some people would fear that role. So I have to be aware of that, which I think was interesting. And another thing that they did to beat fear was he called it dailies. And he was like, people would show their work on a daily basis because it was not done. It wasn't 100% finished. But he's like, if you give people all the way to like finished work, then it creates all this like tension and everything. He's like, whereas if you get a culture used to, here's my stuff that I did today. Yeah, it doesn't look great, but like give us some feedback. So this daily feedback cycle was part of their culture of getting rid of fear too, which I thought could be useful for a lot of creative areas.
That's super powerful, especially the defensiveness or ability to take feedback. I know everyone says they love feedback and they love constructive criticism, but if you have spent weeks, months, years on like a project, you're not going to take feedback constructively if it's a polished, fine, finished version.
Yeah,
But if it's what did you do today in certain parts of it and it's in progress and you know you're going to make changes anyway, then you're going to be a lot more open to that feedback and willing to make changes and just hear.
totally. And I think this gets to his view too of he has this concept of the beast and the ugly baby. And you can think of it as say Toy Story was coming along and it's, 1993, 1994. That's the big movie that's close to the finish line. That's your beast. All these people are working on it. It's taking, it's going to be generating the most revenue, but it's generating the most expense. And that's this giant beast that's rolling along. But he's like, you also have these ugly babies where it's a little creative project. It's very fragile and you have to protect those. He's like, these are very separate streams and you have to protect those. And I think it's an interesting concept of his was, well, when can you tell something's good? And he was like, you can't. He's like, everything at the start sucks. He's like, it's all bad. And he's like, then what you can do though is you can see how the team is working. And he's like, if the team is gelling, he's like, then it's fine. He's like, because the actual like making of the movie, that's the problem they're trying to solve. Like it's gonna be hard. But he's like, if they're all enthused and working together, he's like, that's fine. He's like, you have to worry when your lead director or project manager, people have lost faith in them or the team's getting angry. But if everyone's like working and kind of in the same direction, it's like then you just let that ugly baby grow up.
It's super interesting the way he thinks about things. And because I know he says in the podcast, like their product as Pixar is just a result of a few people working very closely together for a very long time. So his job as CEO was just to manage relationships and not worry about the output, which is, I mean, given the background, how he created all this tech to make animation and computer generated graphics and kind of led the industry in a very innovative direction. But then to say in the end that like his job wasn't the technology, was just to like manage people and make sure they can work well together was super interesting. Um, it kind of leads into another part where, and he realized this after reflection. So his whole goal in life was to create the first feature length computer animated movie, became his North Star, and then he achieved it. So
Yep.
he has like 20 years, gets his goal, and then he kinda realized that what made the technology people and himself most proud was the reviews of Toy Story when it came out in 1995 was not about the technology. It was about, "This is a good movie.
Yeah.
This is a good story," and there'd be one line saying, like, "Computer animated graphics, computer generated graphics," and that became his proudest moment was not the tech technology to do that, but just creating something that people enjoyed and the quality of it. So then that became their, like, next North Star mission is just create a company that makes really good movies, tech assisted, of course, because that's his background, but it's a different way of thinking about it and just that self-awareness.
And that's the crazy part. Like, so I read that the average Pixar movie takes 4 to 6 years, and something like 50 to 60% of the time is on the story, the concept, and everything. Like, that's the major lead up to it. And it's interesting. They start with, a person, and then they go to this person who's got a passion for an idea, and they say, okay, come to us with like 3 ideas. And then the main reason is, okay, if they get stuck on one idea, at least they can rotate to another. And then they come into the, Ed Catmull's office and everything, and they present the ideas. And the person, I guess, always said, like, oh no, like, I love all of these 3 ideas the same. Whichever one you pick, I will take forward. But Ed was like, no, like, as they presented, you could tell that like, one was obviously their favorite. And then once that's picked, then they would go pick a writer. And then I think this is the interesting part, which goes into the story, is he would tell them to go to the outside world and find something different, find something new that you can put into this movie. Cause he's like, we don't want a derivative work. We want something unique, which I thought was really pretty creative.
Yeah, it's a really interesting take, and then the way they I mean, this comes back to the brain trust, managing people, but I think he also said they made 20 movie or they started 21 movies and they completed 20.
Yeah.
So there was one movie that didn't come to completion. So it's like,
That was Inside Out, wasn't it?
mm,
I think it was Inside Out, and I think there was one director who started it, and or what became Inside Out. There was a director who started it, and then the team lost faith, so they brought in one of their powerhouse directors, and he was like, "Well, if I'm restarting this project, I think I have a better idea for the story," and that's what came Inside Out.
yeah, yeah, yeah. But for a movie production company to like start 21 movies and come 20 to completion
Crazy.
is pretty well, he said it's pretty rare. I don't know that. I don't work in movie production, but I'll take his word for it.
I think also like so, as Steve said, they launched Toy Story, tons of acclaim. People love the story. That was the focus. Bug's Life was their second one. And it was interesting because Ed said they hired people who could do the job for that movie. It was like the second production. They were like, we need people who can do the job. So they hired those people. And he said it was the worst hiring that they did in the history of Pixar. And what they did after that was like, well, how can we create a program and hire for potential? Ed was like, we need to hire for potential. We don't want to hire for people's skills. So they started an intern program. 8 people applied and joined. 7 of those people ended up coming to Pixar after they graduated and worked there. But more importantly, he said they went back to school and then they're talking about because they gave them real work. And they're like, yeah, I got to make a movie. Like
That's so cool.
yeah, you're at university and you're like, you come back from summer and it's like, yeah, no, I was making a movie for Pixar. This is what I was doing.
That was not my internship.
No, no, that was not my internship. So I think it was like cool. Like, yeah, it's an interesting company, but they gave them real work. And now they have 10,000 applicants for 100 intern spots. And they're like, this is like an amazing key talent input for us that, like, I mean, most companies with a mission should copy very quickly.
I like how he's been so focused on community for his entire life. He tells a story when he was at New York Tech and they're doing their research into computers work. And one of the things that they decided to do, his group, and it was blessed by administration, is just to publish all of the work that they were doing. And this is back in the old timey times when this isn't like internet publishing. Like you had to go search for it, but it created this real sense of community amongst his classmates, people who are then in computer graphics. And so then when he went to interview with Lucasfilms, one of the first questions in that interview was, who else should we be talking to That was the question.
Oh, yeah,
It
yeah.
wasn't necessarily like, "Who else should we talk to for this job?" But he found out later that every other single person that got interviewed didn't say any other names, which, I mean, makes sense. They want the job. But he was the only person that was like, "Oh, here's like 10 other people. You talk to this person, this person, this person, this person." And they really liked that because George Lucas had a similar mindset about he wanted to create technology for the industry,
Yeah.
not just for his production company. But I mean, what you're just saying about the internship goes back to like Ed's whole philosophy was never about like, I want to build this tech all by myself and do this thing. It was always about like build community to attract the right people, and that'll help create the right culture and the best quality product that you can do. And that like openness is interesting, and it's also interesting that that was the connection with George Lucas that kind of kickstarted this whole career in movies as well.
Yeah, no, that's a really good insight, and I totally agree. I think it's like, I mean, you look at what George Lucas put out into the industry and what he did with Star Wars and moving that whole industry forward, and yeah, if you wanted to work with the best, it was like, it's obvious, like, that's where they were, and same thing with Pixar.
Just
And
imagine it like in his Lucasfilms days, he's working on this technology for like special effects and motion
yeah,
graphics, and then you have like Steven Spielberg and Martin Scorsese just popping by, seeing what you're working
yeah,
on. Like
it's
that's
crazy.
crazy.
It's crazy. Um, okay, so then I kinda wanna bring in this other story about the Disney because they go public in 1995. They launched Toy Story the same week, does really well. Company has a market cap of $1.5 billion. IPO goes really well. Initial price was $22. First day close, $39. So everything's rolling really well. Um, and then in 2006, Disney buys Pixar.
Mhm.
But it was interesting because Bob Iger, who was the CEO, the incoming CEO for
Yeah, the recently appointed CEO.
the recently appointed CEO, he was actually in um, Hong Kong, and it was September 2005, so it was like the year before. And he's standing on Main Street. It's like 95 degrees Fahrenheit, and he's watching the floats go by at the grand opening parade of Hong Kong Disneyland. And there's the classics, you have Snow White, Cinderella, Peter Pan. Renaissance hits, you got like Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, Lion King. And then you have Pixar characters come through. And it's like Toy Story and Monsters and Finding Nemo. And everyone was losing their minds over the Pixar characters. And he was looking around at the other people that he was with. And he's like, "Are you guys seeing this?" And no one picked up on him. He's like, "We haven't created a character that people care about in like a decade."
Mhm.
He's like, "Everyone cares about Pixar. Like this is big." And so he went into the board and he's like, maybe we buy Pixar using this story. And
And at the time, they're just the distributor and
yeah,
marketing arm for Pixar. Like that was the deal,
yep,
right? Like Pixar would make the movies, create the movies, and they would be distributed through Disney.
yeah,
So they were involved with them already.
totally involved with them, but didn't have their IP. So then they ended up purchasing them. And there was some not nice words between Steve Jobs and the last CEO of Disney, but Bob Iger, I guess, called up Steve Jobs and was basically like, "Hey, like you guys are the best at this. We kind of need you." And the honesty was just so opening that Steve Jobs was like, "Oh, okay, like we could do this." um, and then yeah, they ended up selling to Disney, which is crazy. And the other crazy part is,
Is that a universe? Like they'd already been working together for a decade, like dealing from such a place of weakness to gain authenticity. Is that like best practice? Is that something you can really, really do? Or is that just like works in certain
I
situations?
think it's a very certain situation. I think you have Bob Iger who's coming in, knows that Steve Jobs has a very bad blood with the last CEO, and him to be just like, "Hey, we're all aware of this," and give him the respect. I think it's a very certain situation that he fleshed out pretty quickly that was the right approach.
Yeah,
Um,
read the room and pick the right approach for the situation. Don't always just say, "Hey, I got nothing."
yeah, totally. Um, but two things with the Disney thing that was interesting that I found was they had two separate R&D departments. So, and the agreement was that like Pixar and Disney didn't have to use the technology that the other one created, but they would share back and forth. And Ed Catmull thought that that was a really strength between the two because you just have two independent thought trains. And then with George Lucas, after they were acquired, they met like every year at a conference as well. And then the other thing that I found super interesting is Ed Catmull's like brain trust that he brought.
Mhm.
He's like, no one from Disney came. Like Bob Iger came by himself to see us. He's like, no one from Disney came and was like, hey, like, what are you guys doing that's making this so successful? He's like, they only peeled one layer of the onion and they were like, oh, they've got Ed and John and that's why they're so good and that's why they're crushing. And he's like, no one came from Disney and was like, can we like see what's going on here? And he said the brain trust methodology, he's like, it took 4 years for it to work at Disney. Like they were going back and forth every week, and it took 4 years for that to work. So it was like the implementation of that is apparently difficult.
I think even in the very beginning when he was talking about the brain trust, he mentions, like, how it ended up was great, but when it first started, it didn't, and it took a while for people to buy into the process. Um, and I like how in a lot of his stories, he just talks about asking questions and going into more details and going one layer deeper. Like, they were open with Disney and they could share things back and forth, but no one really came to ask them about, like, their processes and why they're cranking out the hit after hit, how things are working. And no one said anything to him outright, but his assumption was they just assumed that it was they had Ed, they had him, they had John, they had Steve Jobs. So it was just like it was that that made the difference, and it wasn't the fact that it's those people that work together to put the processes in place to make the rest of the team successful.
Yeah.
Um, and another thing that I thought was interesting is the interviewer brings up this concept of that someone at Pixar said quality is the best business plan.
John Lasseter. Yeah, he said that.
And then, but Ed is just like, well, that wasn't a Pixar thing. That was his personal philosophy. I agree. I totally agree. But then he said, we didn't actually have a mission statement at Pixar
Yeah.
because a mission statement tells you who you are and what you're going to do. But I always thought we should be constantly asking questions and being like, what are we doing? Why are we doing it? Are we on the right path?
Yeah.
Rather than having that predetermined. So it's that inquisitive questioning mindset is, I think, probably helped him out quite a bit. And it's very interesting. And one more thing on that. I know I should probably stop talking and throw
No,
it to
no,
you,
keep
but
going.
no, I'm on a roll. The other thing that he talked about that I thought was really a good mindset was his assumption that he picked up in at New York Tech, that he went in there with some of his ideas on how to be a manager, how to run a business. And he said half of them were really good
Oh yeah.
and the other half were a crock of shit. And then he figured at that time that half the things he would be right about things 50% of the time and wrong about things 50% of the time. And always going in assuming that you could be wrong gets you to ask the questions like, am I doing the right thing? Is this wrong? Have I seen this before? And then if you're questioning that and not thinking you're right, you're going to spend less time on wrong things because you'll identify them sooner and you can spend more time with conviction on the things that you think are right.
Yeah. I mean, that's a really insightful thing for him to think about. Um, and I think you stated it like right there. He's extremely thoughtful in how decisions are made, how you treat people, how you build a culture, and very like I'm not getting into the product. I'm dealing with people, and that's my job. And so humble. Like he's a fascinating character, and he's very strange as like as a leader of a company. I find. Um, I also liked his. I mean, his no mission statement. I think was great, and I loved his. Everyone says story is the most important thing, so it doesn't matter. And I was like, yeah, that's a great insight. Like if everyone's saying the same thing, it's kind of like Mark Zuckerberg, right? Like move fast but break things. Like you have to be like, here's good but bad. And Ed was like, no one ever says like, let's build a bad story. Like that's just
Mm,
doesn't exist. Um, can I share some interesting trivia?
I like trivia.
We shared this before, but I think this is hilarious. So during the production of Toy Story 2, there was an animator who accidentally ran a global delete command on the main server.
Oh,
So Woody's boots vanished, then his hat, and soon 90% of the film was wiped out, and the backup systems also failed. And I mean, this is years of work. And it was only saved because the supervising technical director, Galen Susman, she had given birth a few months prior and was working from home. So she had a copy of the entire film on a computer at her house. So apparently, like, they carefully carted her hard drive to the studio like a precious artifact, and like that's what saved Toy Story 2, which I think is hilarious.
So what you're
Um,
saying is remote work is important.
remote work is important. Take that hard drive from your work; they will appreciate it. Um, this is a cool one too. For Wall-E, so Steve Jobs bought Pixar from George Lucas in 1986 for 10 million, like we talked about. Um, but because of the tight connection to Apple, Jonathan Ive, so he's the legendary designer behind the iMac, iPod, and iPhone,
Mhm.
he was actually brought in to help design the sleek white minimalist look of Eve in Wall-E,
Oh, interesting.
which I thought was pretty cool. Um, and then this is kind of neat. This is kind of like a little Easter egg. So in almost every Pixar film, you can spot the hidden code A113,
Which stands for?
which stands for, well, first, yeah, it appears on like Andy's mom's license plate in Toy Story. It's on a camera lens in Finding Nemo, on a box in Bug's Life. So it stands for a classroom at the California Institute of the Arts, where Pixar pioneers like John Lasseter, Brad Bird, and Pete Docter studied character animation. So I was like, it's cool. They like little throwbacks,
I
little Easter eggs.
I need to find more of these and then watch the movies. I think that'd make it interesting to try and just, like, find these things. What was the other one you were talking about? The pizza Galaxy Pizza, Pizza Express?
Yeah, so I've seen every single one of these movies, and I had no idea. So there's a Pizza Planet truck.
Pizza Planet.
And so it's officially designated as a battered 1978 Gyoza Mark 7 light hauler. So it's this like crappy whatever
I
delivery truck.
I used to have one of those.
Did you?
No.
I was like, Steve, I've known you for like most of our lives. Pretty sure I never saw one. Um, but yeah, so it was a multi-sensory like Easter egg that they used. So not only would they have the visual in most movies, they also had like this characteristic audio track. Um, And it's even in Brave, which is like a medieval film, and it's actually a wood carving at the witch's house.
Ah.
But it was cool. Like they were one of the early films who or early production studios who did these little Easter eggs. Do you want to do takeaways?
Yeah, let's quickly run them down.
What do you think, Steve? If you're an executive at a creative company, what would your number one key takeaway be for like the next week? What would you institute?
I would try and institute or put in motion the idea of the brain trust for major projects, milestones along the way for projects. I don't think it's something you could implement this week and have it up and running fully, but I would definitely take the steps. What I'd probably institute this week is just try and change the mindset of, or adopt the mindset of being right 50% of the time
Yeah,
and
yeah.
wrong 50% of the time. Ask more questions, and then instill that in the rest of your leadership team.
Yeah, I really like the brain trust idea. I think that's key. Um, I think also I would look at ugly babies. I think as you're an executive for a larger corporation, you really focus on earnings in next quarter and what's generating the revenue, and you really want to focus though on the innovation and where your R&D is going, and you want to protect it. So I think I would also focus on, okay, where are our little flower buds growing, and how do we protect them to give them time to see if they can actually be meaningful.
Yeah, I like that. Another one that I would start looking at is where in your industry you can find cooperators. The just the concept of George Lucas building this technology for
Yeah.
the rest of the industry. Ed himself publishing all his papers when he's in grad school to like build up the industry and the community. And he does tell that story about George Lucas and Steven Spielberg. Like one day they go see Jaws together and like they're happy for each other that, the lineup is around the corner. And then the next time it's Star Wars.
Oh yeah.
So they're like, if they were released on the same day, they wouldn't be as happy for each other because they'd be competing for that same money. But if they're released months apart, they just want the industry to please their customers and gain momentum and share technology. So I would find those maybe like not direct competitors because obviously you have proprietary information,
Yeah.
but those sort of adjacent companies where maybe you do start sharing practices and ideas and thoughts and grow the industry together. And with that, um, the old saying that a rising tide raises all boats kind of mentality.
Yeah, I like that. And I would also take away one other thing. And from a creative standpoint, I really like Ed's idea of getting out of your comfort spot and going outside to find something new to incorporate. I think most places get complacent and think internally and, we'll try to improve and here's what our competitors are doing. And I think it's very rare for people to go like, let go outside, like go to a different country, go to a different industry, find something that is weird and different and take that risk on bringing that in so that you're not making it a derivative work. It's truly unique. And I think that's what makes a lot of the Pixar films so good is that the stories haven't been done. Like they're fascinating.
Absolutely. It's so easy to just operate in your bubble and around the same people and get in that echo chamber. So as the kids say, touch grass once in a
Yes.
while.
Touch grass, people. Um, do we want to talk about anything else? Tangents, Steve?
Tangents. Should we save the tangents for next time?
No, no,
All right. All right.
never.
How dare I cut off a tangent?
How dare you cut off a tangent? I want to talk about Royal Pop watches. So this is an interesting.
We have the time.
We have, we have the time. If you're busy, guys, just feel free to leave. But we have the time. No, this is interesting. I mean, it kind of went viral a couple weeks back, and it was a collab between AP and Swatch. AP makes very expensive wristwatches. Swatch is a mass producer, and they came out with this like what people thought would be a really cool wristwatch, and then all of a sudden, when it was revealed, it was a pocket watch. And people are like, "What's going on?" It's this super colorful pocket watch. But if you dig into the story a little bit, it's really cool, I think, because it's AP's customer base is 80% men. Um, and when you look at the pocket watch with the lanyard that was designed with it, it's actually not more of a pocket watch, it's more of a purse watch. And
Mm.
so the theory was that they looked at like the little boo-boo, the crazy little stuffed animals that came over and were hitting up the viral scene with all the celebrities wearing them on the purse, that this is like purse jewelry. And I always thought it was such a brilliant take on here's one, a collab between two companies that you wouldn't always see, and two, like a very expensive watch company that I think is trying to target more of the female customer with like a purse watch that to like open them up to their brand. And I was like, this is actually like a really creative like collab branding event, and it went so viral that they ended up having to shut down a whole bunch of stores because they were worried about people swarming each other and everything. And then they don't know if it's limited edition, but apparently the last Moonwatch collab with Swatch launched 250,000 watches, so they think, okay, maybe this will be in kind of the same element. But I think I don't know, it's a really cool moment that happened, a couple weeks back.
That is fascinating. I mean, and to tie it back to everything else we just talked about, to expand your market using a collab and like an adjacent company instead
Yeah.
of like a direct competitor is just obviously from that example super effective.
Yeah, tide raises all boats. Thanks everyone for listening. Subscribe, like.
And give us 5 stars or leave us a review on whichever platform you've listened to this on. If you can find links to everything we talked about in the show notes or visit the archive at hatandtat.com.
Yeah, appreciate everyone. And if you have any suggestions for future episodes or you want me and Steve to talk about anything, just let us know. Thanks, everyone.